Test, test. How's it going, everybody? So, yeah. Oh, I'll make you come back. That's for sure. How are you? Good deal. Thanks for coming out tonight. Just wanted to kick things off here. I wasn't around for the last event, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm tripping over myself at all. But wanted to kick things off tonight and just kind of give you a brief intro to the event. Welcome to React Denver. Obviously, you know you're here. So we have some great talks tonight. One in particular, we've got our very own Kevin McKernan here and Andy Enamorado. Where are you, Andy? He's hiding in the back. But wanted to just kind of fill you in on a few details first, do some housekeeping. If you didn't already, feel free to grab some pizza, some salad. Looks like there's plenty left, soda as well. So please do help yourself, but be mindful of the speakers while you do so. Restrooms are across the hall and then around the bank of elevators if you need gender-specific restrooms. Otherwise, there's just co-ed restrooms across the way there. And beyond that, wanted to give a big thank you to our sponsors tonight. Formidable Labs is sponsoring this event. So if you could give them a round of applause. They stepped in kind of last minute and really came through for us. Yeah. Also, as usual, thanks to Turing and Salt as well, are some secondary sponsors for us, helping us keep this event rolling. So really appreciate their support, everybody's support there. And actually, before I go to the next slide, Chris, the guy who was just up here, do you want to come say a few words? Chris with Formidable Labs, by the way.
Our job announcements, yeah, next. Go for it. Look at that, let's do that. How's it going? I'm Chris from Formidable. We were lucky enough to be able to sponsor tonight's event. We have a small team here. We also have offices in Seattle and in London, but we have a growing team here. Do you guys want to wave? There's some of my team right there. Awesome. And we do have two openings right now. We have a senior React engineer position and a senior Node engineer. So if those interest you at all, you can talk to me or any of us after the event or email me. And we have some exciting news to be announced pretty soon for our Denver efforts. So stay tuned. And do you want me to just turn it over to other people with jobs? Does that work? Yeah, other people with jobs? You're the MC now.
Howdy guys, I'm Dean Slama, a UI engineer based here in Denver, but I work for a company called Lucid, based in New Orleans. Lucid is a technology company based in the market research industry, and right now we have some openings for React developers. In particular, a senior React developer. A little background on our technology. We're doing a big port right now of a legacy application, so that's a lot of fun. Getting dirty with GraphQL and React. And we have slated a bunch of new React applications for 2019, so we're trying to staff up right now, and in particular, a React developer. So if anybody's interested, that's my email address. Just hit me with an email or reach out afterwards. Thank you. Oh, remote position, right? So you can be based anywhere.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Kwa, and I have been working on this site, Cinefuse.com, for a while now. It's been going on for 6 years, and we revamped it. And basically, it's me, one guy, and a small back-end team. And the front-end React guy, he's gone, so I just kind of need some help on that. I have a regular 9-to-5 job, so if anybody's interested in this job, it's freelance, and it's very loose deadlines, and you're working with somebody who I've been in the field doing HTML and CSS and branding for 15 years, so I'm pretty easy to work with. But so yeah, it's just a small freelance gig if anybody's interested. Thank you.
Any other job announcements? Going once, going twice. Cool. We do have a few announcements related to the event. Sean, I believe I was speaking to earlier. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a quick plug. For those of you who don't know him, Ryan Florence, who used to be part of the React Router team, is actually going to be here next month, October 17th and 18th, doing a workshop here in Denver. I know early bird tickets are still available, so it just might be something you want to check out. I'll toss his name up on the board along with the URL information information for that. And I'll also post it to the actual meetup website. So just a quick plug.
Thank you.
Yeah, and related to that, Ryan was great. Up a free ticket, so we will be raffling that off. On the raffle are to be announced. We're still kind of trying to work that out as far as what the fairest way to do that is. So stay tuned there. But yeah, that should be a really cool event. Beyond that, any other announcements, I guess I should ask? No? Okay. Hacktoberfest is actually next month. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but this event is something that I followed personally for a couple years and have thought was, I thought it's a really cool idea. Never done it myself, but if you're interested, it's basically a way to get people introduced to open source, contributing to open source. I think they have the requirement is that you complete 5 PRs to any open source repo, and you get a shirt for it, and some other goodies as well, I think. So really cool. If anyone is interested in hosting an event, we've kind of kicked that idea around as well. They offer all sorts of resources for doing that sort of thing. So I think it's a really good way to get engaged and try to do some community building on your own if that interests you. But I do recommend checking this out. The Hacktoberfest .digitalocean.com. It is DigitalOcean that kind of puts this thing on with the help of many sponsors. But check it out. And with that, I think that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to introduce Kevin McKernan here. He's been absolutely instrumental in helping us with the meetup, and I'm really excited to hear him talk about React app deployment. So please give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Sam. Can everybody hear me good? Okay. Cool. All right, so I'm going to talk about, we have lots of talks about how to do things with React, kind of, techniques, stuff like that, but, we need to be able to use this. So let's talk about, it would help if I put my slides up there. All right, there we go. Much better. Okay. Yeah, so anyways, so we're going to talk about a bunch of different things about hosting React apps, what it takes to host a React app, what a React app actually is, some different options, and we'll go from there. So as Sam introduced, my name's Kevin McKernan. I'm a senior front-end engineer at AirDNA, which is a local startup working in the short-term rental space and doing lots of cool things with data. I'm also one of the co-organizers here for the React meetup. So quick kind of overview of what we'll be talking about. One, what actually is a React app? Like, we know what the code looks like when we write it, but what does it actually look like when it gets to the browser? What does it take to host it? What are some different options for hosting it? And how would I deploy this to those options? So, and this might be a little small. Sorry about that. Oh, actually, I think I can do, I can do that in a sec. Oh, God. So what makes up a React app? So I'll zoom in on, this is just like a tree view of a file system. You should all be able to read that pretty easily. So if you're using create React app and you run yarn build, you'll get a directory structure that looks like this. So under your build directory, you get a static directory that then has some CSS, has some JavaScript, has some images. So all that a React app is an HTML page, which is what loads in your script. And then you've got your script. In this case, there's only one, but depending on what tooling you're using, you could have multiple chunks broken out based on routes. You could have your vendors in a different file. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do there. And then the same with your styles. Here they're all in one file. Could be, could not be. So, oh boy. Okay. Yeah, so if this looks familiar, that's because it's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, what do I need to host a React app? Well, any web server that can serve HTML can serve a React app. Full stop, period, end of sentence. Seriously. That doesn't mean there aren't advantages, disadvantages of some different things that you can use. But realistically, if you can point at it with a web browser, you can serve a React app with it. So let's talk about some options. So one, and I've been hosting things on DigitalOcean for years. DigitalOcean offers a bunch of different sizes of virtual machines in the cloud. So starting at like $5 a month for a server with a gig of RAM, which can run pretty much anything that you're just playing around with. I'll take questions at the end. And so DigitalOcean can host anything, not specific to React. Anything that you can run on a Linux virtual machine, you can run on DigitalOcean. Another option is now.sh from Zeit, which is kind of one of my new favorite services. Now is really cool because you have your app on your computer and you don't have to necessarily you don't have to worry about setting up a server. You don't have to worry about oh, what do I need for specs on this machine? You can just run a command, app boots up, and that's it, and it's running. Hence the name Now. And I'm going to run through some kind of how to actually put things up on these in a few, so we'll get there. Netlify is also really cool. Netlify is more specific to kind of front-end applications. On Now, you can run a back-end API, you can run a Docker container, you can run anything. Netlify is more focused on front-end apps, but it's really neat. You can hook Netlify right up to a GitHub repo, and anytime you push something to the specified branch, it'll go ahead and set it up. You can do that automatically based on pull requests. You can have different branches with different URLs. It's amazing how much fairly complicated things to do yourself they just handle. It's like, oh, just click a button and we'll do it. And on both of those, SSL's just totally baked in. Everything's SSL'd as well. And then one of the it's been around for a while, GitHub Pages is also a good option for static apps. I'm sure a handful of us at least have built kind of a portfolio hosted on GitHub Pages with a github.io URL. So those are some of the options that I'm going to show examples of. But again, anywhere that you can serve a website, you can serve a React app. So let's see. So first I'll show setting something up with DigitalOcean. So over here on DigitalOcean, you'd actually be setting up a server. So you could run multiple applications off of a server. In this case, I'm just going to set up a server that'll serve my little app quick. There's all kinds of different options you can do on here. Existing applications, MySQL, Node, Ruby, whatever. There should be. Yeah, we'll just grab a regular web server. Add my SSH key. And we'll go ahead and create that. Anybody that's played with any of these services before, it's really impressive how quickly DigitalOcean will spin this up for you. So there's lots of similar providers to DigitalOcean. You can do similar machines on Azure. You can do things on AWS. I started using DigitalOcean probably 5 years ago, and I've just stuck with it. It's really easy to find anything. Their UI is really nice. So cool. Yeah. So we have our little machine, and so if I were to open up a new tab and go to this IP address, I'll probably get a welcome page. Yep, there we go. Yeah, so it's already stood up a web server for me. And then at that point, yeah, so then from here, I actually don't have everything set up to completely finish that. But at this point, all you would do is you would go in and you would upload that build directory and into the web root of the server, and then your React app would be here. So next up, I'll show off Netlify. Go ahead and log in with GitHub. And so right here, you just wire this right up to a repo on GitHub. So I already have an account. But then from here, we'll pick GitHub. Already connected. Let's see. I'll grab this React example. Yeah, so here you get some really nice settings from them of what branch you want to deploy, if you've got a specific build command, where everything's going to show up. It does a pretty good job of inferring this from your package.json file. So in this case, this is just create React app, so it knows what to do. So then here, I can just hit deploy. And in just a minute, this will be spun up. And then, yeah, so once you've got it hooked up here, it auto-deploys based on branches. Netlify also has some cool, as this is running, some other neat things that you can do of like previews off of pull requests. It's got a way to handle forms. It's got some really nice tools around like serverless functions that make it a little easier to set up. Yeah, so they're doing some really neat stuff. That's we host our meetup site with Netlify. So, all right, yeah, so our site's deployed. So I can click on this URL, and there we go, and that's it. Yeah, you know, few of you have probably seen this design before. Yeah, and so then you can, like, this just auto-generates a domain for you, but you can go in here and you can set up a custom domain. You can then set up SSL for that. There's all kinds of nice stuff you can do. And this isn't just limited to React apps. You can, anything front-end related that it's serving static files, you can do with Netlify. So next up, I'll talk about now and go to the, yeah, so it's just now.sh. They've got there's all kinds of cool things you can read about, which I won't get into running through. But what I will show you is what it takes to deploy something with now. So this is a typical React app. This is the same one I just put up on Netlify. So pretty simple little package.json, just the default from create React app. So I have the now CLI installed. If you're on a Mac or Windows, they've got a really nice little installer. It gives you a little kind of toolbar app that you can use to manage stuff as well. Here I've got the command line. So from here, all I do is I just run now. And so it shows you the output here. So it's actually on their service. It's pulled in your application, installs your dependencies, sets everything up for you. On Netlify, you do have to pull it from a repo somewhere in the cloud. With Now, you don't have to have a copy of that code anywhere. You can just have it locally and go ahead and run this. So you can also use Now for, like if you've got something simple, like a little HTML file or something like that that you want to host for a little bit, you can toss that up on there as well. So that's almost done. Let's see if I go back up here and click on that URL. And then while we wait for this for a sec, one of the cool things that both Netlify and Now do is they give you this idea of it's essentially a versioned deploy. So if you see in the URL up here, it's react-example- a whole bunch of gibberish. And they do that because each time you deploy, you get a brand new set of that deployment. So you don't have to worry about like, oh, well, like there's some old stuff left from the last version that didn't clear, my cache didn't clear properly, things like that. That's really nice for when you're deploying versions of things, but obviously doesn't work that well for your customers that you're like, oh, well, we're on version ABC 123, so you have to go to that. That doesn't work. So on both of these, you can do, on Netlify, you can do custom domains, and you can also do aliases, which is where you can pick what's at the beginning of the domain. And you can do the same thing on Now. So, yeah, like with Now, for example, I can do Now, alias, React Denver example. And so it will point React Denver example.now.sh to that one specific deployment. And so by doing that, you can reference the URL that you know what it is, but it points to a specific deployment. So the other nice thing about this is if you push something and it's bad, you can roll back instantly, and that old instance is still there. So it doesn't have to build your previous version, anything like that. It can just immediately snap back to it. So yeah, so now if I go to React Denver example.now.sh, so we get the same app here. So yeah, and so that's like I said, we host the React Denver site on Netlify. I have some personal web apps that I have hosted on Now. Like I said, I've used DigitalOcean for years. There's a bunch of different things out there. Now, when we get into, let me get back through. I have a bunch of tabs open. Okay. So finally, how do I deploy this? So you saw a couple examples. Now and Netlify both have their own kind of process for deploying that are really great. The ease of use of these are definitely targeted at, not that you can't use them for production scale, but for the most part, if you're at a large company, you probably have a DevOps team, if not a DevOps person. But all of these services that I've just kind of showed off are awesome for, you know, I'm building something personally that I want to, you know, maybe it's a product that I'm working on and I want to host it and I want people to be able to see it. You know, look how long it takes to get something live. Super easy. And not that these don't scale. Yeah, I don't have names off the top of my head, but you know, you can go to the sites of all of these hosts and they'll show off who their big clients are and talk about it and whatnot. But so just in general, like other ways to deploy a React app, good old FTP, SFTP. You know, we're very nowadays, if I ever have to actually FTP deploy something, I'm like, why don't I have something better set up? But has its place, works, has worked for a long time. So yeah, in that case, you know, you're literally just uploading files to your web server. With Now, they've got their command line tool. With Netlify, you hook it up to a repo. You can also, with Now, you can use that same CLI on a any of the different CI services, Jenkins, Travis, Circle, Drone. There's probably others. You know, you could also have that deploying, you know, maybe you're hosting your React app statically on S3, or maybe you're building a Docker container and putting it up. Those can handle that. And then one of the other things, if you are using your own server, that's kind of cool, is you can use, and this is actually a link, and I tweeted out my slides, and I'll tweet it from the React Denver account as well. Because yeah, I had links to all the services, and then a link here as well, is you can actually set up a Git repository on your web server, and then push your application to that version of the repository, and there's a way to use that to actually check things out on the server. So it gives you a little bit more of that. I push it, and it goes where it should, but you would do something like git push master staging, and then it would deploy it to staging. It's a tutorial from DigitalOcean on how to do that. So yeah, any questions? Yeah. I'll get you first. Can somebody get him a mic? Thanks. Oops. There you go.
So DigitalOcean was a service that you just mentioned. Is there a particular deal or package on DigitalOcean that you would refer? Is it the droplets? Is it that?
Okay, yeah. So DigitalOcean calls all their different like servers droplets, and that's essentially just one cloud virtual machine. They come in a ton of different sizes. You can get crazy with the hardware you can pay for with them, but their base plan is $5 a month for a little slice of a VM with like 1 gig of RAM. And if you're just hosting a React app, that's more than powerful enough. Cool.
Testing. So when you're talking about the different platforms that you can deploy an app on, I was just curious if it's common to be using these services. Like, do companies use these services professionally to deploy their apps, or are they more likely to put them, say, on their own server, for instance?
Yeah, I think that so DigitalOcean grows quite a bit. DigitalOcean is definitely focused on like unless you're doing something personally, like you need to have a DevOps or sysadmin kind of person to manage your infrastructure that's running on DigitalOcean. As far as the other services now in Netlify, they're definitely focused at the like kind of more individual developer to small team. I haven't done any performance testing on any of these, but wake up. I haven't done any like testing of these like head-to-head against each other and whatnot, but a React app being static files is very easy to host and serve. I'm sure there are larger applications hosted on these platforms. One that I know of that, like the biggest thing I can think of that's on now is if anybody has used Spectrum. That's kind of a community, not quite a forum, not quite a Slack channel. They've got a bunch of different. If you haven't heard of that, I will pull it up because there's all kinds of cool stuff on there. Yeah, so Spectrum.chat, they have their entire infrastructure is all hosted on now, which is pretty neat to hear about. Yeah, I think that most like kind of enterprise solutions are going to have more robust ways of hosting backends and databases and React apps and whatnot. This was more about like, well, I've built a React app, now I want to put it somewhere to play with it or show it off or whatever. So exactly. Yeah, and I have some personal. I've hosted websites for clients in the past on DigitalOcean on like a $20 a month plan with no problems. There's a nonprofit organization I help out with that I've got some React and Node stuff that's all running on the front end's on Netlify, the back end's on Now, and the database is on DigitalOcean. So there you go, hat trick. Yeah, and I mean, and that works great. That application has most of the users like only like go through a flow with it, like maybe 2 or 3 times, but there's a couple hundred users of that with some pretty active managers. So that's not a like thousands of concurrent users kind of scenario, but it's definitely a couple hundred people used it and didn't have any issues. So. I would definitely be interested to kind of dig further into like how far you can go on those platforms. So thank you.
That now deployment seemed like a little too magical for me. Where's the config file for that? How do you set that up?
Yeah. So there honestly there is not one. So when you install their CLI, you log into your account. Let's see, my React example. Yeah, I mean, so there's nothing hiding in here. There's no like .dot file hidden config or anything. It takes the name out of your package.json or your folder, and then it adds a random ending to it. And then when you do your when you alias it, it'll make sure that that's unique, and if it's already taken, it won't let you do it. I actually have, so my slides for tonight are actually a React app that's hosted on Now. And so I've got that on here as well. I do have a config file for that. That is literally it. It's just what I want the name of it to be and what I want the alias of it to be. So then when I look at my slides, I go to McKernan hosting reactapps.now.sh, and it's there. It does feel pretty magical. There's a number of more other kind of advanced features and whatnot that you can do. They have on their site, there's all kinds of docs about what you can do. But you can add that config file. You can add separate scripts. You can define scaling rules. If you're on a paid plan with them, you can run multiple instances in multiple data centers. And they have their infrastructure spread out across all the major cloud providers. So they have stuff on GCP, AWS, and probably DigitalOcean. I'm not really sure. They just go, we use everyone. So yeah, so you can you can set up environment variables. You can also, any directory that has a Docker file in it, you can run now. It will pick up that Docker file and it will go build the container, spin it up the exact same way. They're also doing serverless Docker, which is really kind of hard to wrap your brain around. It's like, wait, you're doing what? It's really cool. Yeah, they're doing some really cool stuff. So I would definitely, go dig around and play with some stuff on now. And you can, DigitalOcean doesn't have anything free, but they do bill by the minute, I think. So, or maybe it's by the hour. But anyways, you can, if you want to play around with something for a day on DigitalOcean, it's going to cost you pennies. And the other two services have free tiers. Yeah, no problem. Good question.
Okay, so I'm just kind of getting into deployment, and I'm more familiar with Heroku. I was just wondering if you could maybe give a quick, comparison and instance when Heroku would be the better route versus DigitalOcean.
Heroku is very similar to Now as far as how it works. You have a command line. You can it's actually kind of a combination of a couple of the different things here I've talked about. There is a command line tool. You can also push a Git repository to Heroku. You can also connect Heroku to like a repo on GitHub and have it watch that for deploys. One of the things that I've run into with things that I've hosted on Heroku is that they cap your free applications based on the number of hours that they're live for a month. And whenever you access something, it wakes it up for a certain number of hours. So like at one point I had something on Heroku that was an email to a Slack channel. So if an email went to an email address, it would then dump that into a Slack channel on our company Slack. And I couldn't make it through a month on the free Heroku plan with that because the emails were so frequent that it never went to sleep, and they would want you to start paying for it. And the jump from, and their pricing may have changed. I haven't worked with Heroku that much, so I don't want to say anything overly negative. Every service has its ups and downs. Back when I was looking at using it, their jump from free to paid was like free to like $20 a month, which just wasn't worth it for what I was doing. So, but they do offer more services. I know you can get database, you can get caching like Redis. You can get a couple different things like that on Heroku. That's all on one platform. So. Oh.
So I was wondering with the now.sh, how it creates a new version every time you do a deployment. How does that work with the alias? So if I do a deployment and then it's one alias and then I do another deployment, does it automatically set it up to be the latter one?
No, so you have to run, so like in my example here, I'll run now and that deploys it. And then if I run now alias, it looks at my config file and updates the alias to the new version. So if you wanted to, in like a CI kind of environment, you could have that happen automatically. You know, because you could do something there, like you could have a multi-step like Docker build, for example, where it would run all your unit tests, and if your tests passed, then it would build, it would spin it up, it would alias it, otherwise the build would fail. So, or you can do it manually, like I did.
So back to the question about Heroku compared to Now. Does Now have anything? Heroku's system allows a lot of plugins for other things that you wouldn't necessarily have to build or host yourself. For instance, log management or various things like that, right? Those tend to carry a price with them. So you could add New Relic to your Heroku instance without having to go and get a New Relic account and all of those pieces, or Airbreak or Sentry, or pick your poison of all the different pieces.
Yeah.
Does Now have an ecosystem like that? And when would you say is a good time to move away from something like that into a more traditional system that would leverage a DevOps team like AWS?
Yeah, so I'll answer your questions in reverse order. As far as when to move from something like this to something more robust, as soon as you're actually having measurable performance problems. I know that and I've been guilty of this in the past as well. They're like, what about perf? It's like, well, if nobody's complaining about your app being slow, maybe we should focus on something other than making it faster. Now, obviously, you want your applications to perform well, but that's one of those issues that people can really get sucked into spending a lot of time to make your site, 2 milliseconds faster. As far as Now doesn't do anything other than the hosting. They do have some stuff around logging, which I can show you. So one caveat on their free plan, actually, this isn't, it's just something that you should know, more than it being like a big issue. Well, it could be a big, sorry. So if you're on their free plan, which I'm not, you can actually go to the URL of the application _src, and you can see the source of the application. That could be good. Like for something open source, that might not matter. For something you're like hosting that's for a client maybe, that's probably not great that you can see everything that's in a private repo publicly on the internet. That's just something to know about their free plan. As far as log management, this isn't like anything like New Relic or Sentry, but instead of having to go like log in on a command line or anything, you do get all of the output from the application in a URL that you can go to from a web browser. So here you can see it starting up my React app and serving it. So on the free plan, you can always see the logs. On the paid plan, you cannot. You have to be logged in. So, yeah, that's, everybody's got to incentivize their paid plan somehow. So that's how theirs is. So, cool. We've got one more question.
Yeah. Do you know if Now will work with Docker Compose?
I don't think it'll work with a compose file,
Okay.
Because each deployment on Now is a single single thing. It could be a single set of files. It could be a single like node package. It could be a single Docker container. But yeah, if you want to run multiple services, you would have to individually spin up each of those services, and you could script that.
Sure.
You could have subdirectories in your project, but yeah, I don't think it natively handles a compose file. I'm sure they're working on it though.
Yeah, didn't know if it just like looked at like that was like the hierarchy.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Thanks everybody.
Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. If anybody needs to hit the restrooms, there's tons of food up here, so please do help yourself. We'll see you in 5.
Hello, hello.
Alrighty. Let's kick things back off here. I think I'm still on. So for our final talk tonight, I mentioned him earlier, but Andy Enamorado, he is here to give us a talk on deliberate practice. Just a few words about Andy. I first met him when I got involved with the Full Stack Meetup. I think he's still pretty involved there, and he's done a lot for the community here in Denver. So we're really gracious to have him tonight, and if you could please welcome him with a round of applause. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Live stream all good? All right, I'm gonna walk around a little bit just because, but yeah, cool. So the title of this talk is not practicing to be perfect, as the phrase often goes, but rather practicing to be better, because perfection, especially in software, I don't think it really exists. Find me the perfect software program and I'll call you a liar. Is anyone a runner? I forgot to get example before we started. I need a marathon runner. Do you feel comfortable sharing your most recent time? 3:48, 3 hours, 48 minutes. Anybody else a marathon runner? In 1896, I think that's like the first recorded Olympic marathon. Does anybody have a guess on what the gold medal winning time was? 6 hours? Better. They weren't that slow. They weren't that slow. First place was 2 hours and 58 minutes. In 2016, any guesses? Gold medal time? 2 hours and 8 minutes. A 50-minute improvement. The Colfax Marathon this year, the top female runner would have won the gold medal in the men's Olympics 120 years ago. I don't think the Colfax Marathon is very competitive. I didn't actually look too deep into that. But people are improving, right? So in 120 years, we've shaved 50 minutes off marathon times. A casual runner could have competed for the Olympics 120 some years ago. In the music realm, some composers write songs that are considered, or compositions that are considered unplayable, and then 10, 20 years later, they're standard fare at a music school. So people are improving. The question is, are software people improving? Yeah, gonna need you to come in on Saturday. It's a satire about in the late 60s. A man came up with a notion of the Peter Principle, and it's one of those, there's honesty and truth and comedy kind of things. So this book on organizations and dysfunction in organizations, how people get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. As a new manager, I can attest to that. Yeah, so it was a satire, but there is some truth. Everybody's getting a giggle out of that. Earlier this year, any people from Hawaii in town? I work with a native Hawaiian, kind of, sort of. Remember the missile alert that went out? Like, where ballistic missile? Yeah, there was that. Intel has had a series of problems, bugs. So are we shaving the 50 minutes off our marathon times? Are we making it worse? Now, granted, there's machine learning now and computer vision, and we all have phones in our pockets. There's clearly some improvement. But I think it's fun to look at also the ways that we're not improving. This book recently came out. Dr. Forsgren, I believe she pronounces her name, and some other folks put together this book. I don't know if anyone's read it yet. It's had a good amount of publicity lately. In the book, they talk about effective IT delivery organizations that take about an hour to get code from committed in mainline to running in production. So commit your code, hour later it's in production. Other organizations are still taking months to do that. So it's 2018. There's still places where it takes months to get your software out the door. Is that getting better? I don't know. It's a good thing we're not civil engineers. Sometimes I feel like we get a pass. Our failures can kind of be hidden. Bridges don't collapse, although maybe they do. But it's not quite as viewable, I guess. It's not quite as upfront as when physical things fall down. While doing some research for this talk, I came across this GitHub repo. It's a series of postmortems. Kind of fun to dig around in there and just see the ways that we're not improving. And this is an older site. I'm not sure who all's familiar with the daily WTF. Has all kinds of funny code examples in there and things that make you say WTF. There's this one, a CAPTCHA in JavaScript that like iterates through an array, but there's a bug in it. Anybody spot it? I'll give you a second. I don't know. I think I took a screenshot of it, perhaps. I'll skip to it. They're increasing the value of the variable that they're iterating on. The CAPTCHA would say NaN as part of the CAPTCHA. And if you typed NaN, you would get through the CAPTCHA. Click the link, read it. That was a good one. So yeah, we have this situation where we're not perfect. Maybe we're getting better. Maybe some of us are getting better. And software, right, is this kind of weird thing where it's half art, maybe half engineering. And lately, the term craft, you're a software crafts person. You craft software. It's kind of this mix of both things. There's some creativity. There's some aesthetic value to what you produce. There's also the hard engineering aspect to it. And that's all fun to think about. Okay, we're craftspeople. We're going to improve on our stuff. We're going to whittle away. And then we meet our stakeholders, right? People that are paying us to do the job. This guy, the second from the left, I swear I get that look at home from my wife and kids like all the time when I pitch some crazy idea. Also happens at work. So the stakeholders, right, they want us to perform, right? Probably not many of us in this room, unless maybe you're in touring and you're learning, you don't get to just go and fool around and mess around. You're paid to perform. When you write your code and you try and get it out in production in an hour, that's your performance. So if we're performing all the time, as say a musician does or an athlete does, well, when do we practice? Because practice can help us get better, and that's what we're gonna look at. So let's look at some other professions where people practice a lot. Mozart, everybody probably knows about him. I didn't really know this until I started doing the research. At age 7, he toured as a child and showed off what's called the perfect pitch or absolute pitch. Do we have any musicians in the audience? Do you want to explain perfect pitch? Yeah, or you hear a note and can name what it is. Yeah, totally. It was thought that 1 in 10,000 people had that ability. So Mozart in 1700s going around has this amazing ability. Or does he? Mozart's father, Ludwig, was a music teacher. Mozart had an older sister. I do not know how to say that name, Nannerl. I think the L means the little nanner. She was 4.5 years older. So you can imagine a young Mozart watching his sister, as she was also a musician, getting taught by their father, a music teacher. He probably had a good amount of experience and knowledge. There was a study that was done. I can't remember the year, and I forgot to write it down, but I'll have lots of links for later, where they took 26 children, ages 2 to 6, and put them through the process of learning absolute pitch. Over the course of a year and a half, all but 2 of the children had absolute pitch when they were done. The only 2 that didn't finish the training. They had other stuff to do. It's also been shown that people that speak tonal languages, like especially in Asia, are more likely to have perfect pitch. So starting to get some clues here that maybe there's more to this practice thing, this experience thing, and getting better. One famous example, the Beatles, before they got mega popular, practiced a whole bunch in a small club in Germany. Estimated that they spent 1,200 hours playing together. That was before they came to the Ed Sullivan Show and came to America in a big way. Yeah, interesting. That's a lot of time to spend together performing, isn't it? This story, or this person rather, came from a book called Grit. It's where I read about it. Chia, she's a classical pianist, performed around the world, went to a very nice school for musicians, later served as faculty. She's also a PhD from Harvard. So she's both a advanced PhD, a pretty good one, has some interesting talks and studies, and she's an amazing pianist. She talks in the book Grit that she would practice 4 to 6 hours a day on the piano as a kid, even all the way through school. That doesn't sound easy to me, to get through Harvard while also trying to practice piano 4 hours a day. Kevin Durant, NBA star, love him or hate him for joining on an already good team. Let's take a look at this video, and if YouTube will cooperate here. This is 2011, Kevin Durant and LeBron James doing a little bit of practice. What I want you to look at is watch the routine. By now, these 2 are already all-stars, have already been in the NBA for a while, very successful. Watch how deliberate these practice routines are, and quite frankly, boring. They're like NBA megastars. They could just play one-on-one. They could do dunk contests. Instead, they've got some cones. They've got a defender. They're going through, not just going through the motions. I mean, they're working. You'll notice their shirts are sweaty. Pretty interesting to get a glimpse at their practice routine and not just their performance. Let's see if I can get this to cooperate again. There we go. Serena Williams, obviously been in the news lately. Just an amazing athlete. Like, clearly she's talented. She's got the physical tools. A lot of interesting articles about her workout routine, her ability especially to come back after having a child. Excuse me. What I love is that she had a quote in a magazine, "I hate working out more than anything." I don't really believe that. Like, I don't. If she does, she just powers right through it because she's clearly pretty amazing and must practice and work out a whole bunch. U.S. women's national soccer team, for 6 years, they were ranked the #1 team in the world. Again, let's take a look at one of their practice routines here. Oh, I played it on the wrong side, sorry. Let's see if this will work again. Notice this drill. They're spread out on the field. They're just passing the ball to each other. Again, these are the top women's players in the world, and they're not scoring goals. They're not doing a simulated scrimmage. They're not goofing around. Look how crisp their passes are too for practice. Like, it's like one kick right to the other person. It's pretty amazing, I think. All right. we looked at athletes, we looked at musicians, comedians. Chris Rock, he gave a performance at Madison Square Garden on New Year's Eve, and I think it was 2007. By that point, he had already hosted the Oscars. He was already plenty famous. He had appeared in movies. He did 18 shows at a club in New Jersey, I think called like the Silly Shack. I'm messing up the name, but he practiced he said from March and April on until that show at Madison Square Garden on New Year's Eve. Again, he's already clearly talented. He's worth millions of dollars. And look at the work he's putting into what he's doing. Rodney Dangerfield, for the older set of us, he didn't even, yeah, thanks, Stan. He wasn't even really famous until the 50s, or until he was in his 50s, rather. Interesting thing, he was a comedian earlier on. For 9 years, he basically failed at comedy. He quit. He became an aluminum siding and paint salesman while getting married and raising kids. Eventually, family life at home was disrupted, and he went back to comedy. He still failed, and he had to eventually whittle down his performance to just the basics to really nail the essence of the joke. He said in one article that it would take him 3 months for every 6 minutes of comedy that he would do on the Carson show. So 3 minutes of practice. One more video for us, especially for the folks who had mac and cheese pizza tonight. These gentlemen are going to make some noodles. It's going to be a little hard to see, but on the bottom, they're going to talk about the process of making these noodles. I recommend watching this later. He said he makes 100, if you want to be a good noodle chef, make 100 bowls of noodles a day. He made 500 a day to get better. If we skip ahead here. Now this is another gentleman. He's making soba noodles. And I just skipped it, but what he just said was he had a teacher. For 3 years he practiced under that teacher. And he says something like, I was still learning. 3 years of practice, and he's still learning. Pretty amazing. All right, let's see if we can skip ahead. This one I'm going to skip. It's a really good video from Pixar talking about the sort of creative process and story writing. And it's Brad he did Monsters, Inc. I can't remember his last name. I'm blanking on it now. Thank you. Yeah, he's done a bunch of Pixar stuff. He talks about how when he kind of got into the business, he thought stories were just something you wrote down once, boom, make a movie out of it. Great times. But stories aren't written once. They're written over and over. They go through an editing process. They practice. They hone it down. They whittle it down. That was his quote. Only after telling the story many, many times does it really sparkle. All right, we're almost through our practice examples here. This is Judit Polgar. She is one of 3 sisters. Anyone guess? Well, she's chess, obviously, but in terms of ability, anyone ever heard of her or her family? Yeah, she's the most accomplished and perhaps the best female chess player that ever lived. She was the youngest of 3. When she was 9, she beat 5 players in chess while blindfolded. It's pretty good. Her father, Laszlo, was a Hungarian guy who had a theory. He had studied biographies of hundreds of great intellectuals, and he had identified a common theme, and this is where we're getting to the core of this, that early and intensive specialization in a particular subject could create prodigies, could create geniuses, could create masterworks. The trick was he needed someone to, wow, one of those YouTube videos is still playing somewhere. That's funny. Yeah, I didn't see it. let's see here. Apologies. The trick was with Laszlo is that he couldn't raise a child by himself, so he met Clara, and instead of love letters, he wrote her letters saying, "Will you please have children with me so I can prove that we can create geniuses?" Chess was a perfect subject for him because it could be measured, and there was sort of rules of the game, and they could focus on it. So that's what they did. That family went on to create 3 excellent chess players through lots and lots of learning, lots of practice. Kind of one of the key studies in this idea is from Anders Ericsson and a couple other folks, talking about the characteristics that once are believed to come from innate talent are actually the result of intense practice extended for a minimum of 10 years. If 10 years or maybe 10,000 hours sounds familiar, it was popularized a few years ago in the book Outliers, based on the idea that it just took a certain amount of practice and study before you became great. And what's funny is that Anders Ericsson believes that Malcolm Gladwell got that wrong. A really good podcast on Freakonomics where they kind of splice their audio back and forth, worth a listen to. So yeah, that's a good listen. Essentially, Ericsson said that Gladwell's oversimplified the idea of 10,000 hours, that it's not necessarily an amount of time, it's not 10 years, but it's the way that you practice. So what is this idea of deliberate practice? What is this idea of getting better and improving what you do? It comes from this book, is the most recent book that he's written about it. So I recommend that highly. But let's break it down into kind of the key things. So deliberate practice is where you're developing skills that others have kind of already figured out to do. So an example of NBA athletes, they know how to shoot, they know how to, the right arm angle, the right launch angle, things like that. And especially they have a coach who can kind of coach them through it. Chess, you can study from grandmasters and other people that came before you. 2, practice outside one's comfort zone and constantly try things that are beyond her current abilities. So again, if we look at some of those examples, not just trying to, say, play the violin for an hour, like, cool, I'll play around, or guitar, I'll mess around, play a few songs, but actually trying to level up your skills. So maybe playing a new chord you can't quite get the hang of, or playing a whole new song. The interesting thing is that Ericsson and others call this part of it generally not enjoyable. So I think everyone here is familiar with the feeling of trying something new, maybe being a little bit scared, feeling a little bit out of your realm. And so, yeah, it's not always an easy thing to do. 3, give yourself well-defined specific goals to improve your performance. Again, if you can have a coach kind of guide you through that, that's part of deliberate practice. 4, it is what it says on the tin. It requires your full attention and conscious actions. When you saw that video of LeBron and Kevin Durant, like they weren't fooling around, they weren't throwing behind the back passes, like they were into bouncing a ball around some orange cones. Again, these guys are NBA all-stars. They could be doing almost anything else with their time. Feedback and modification of efforts in response to that feedback. So if you're practicing, you want to find a way to get feedback on what you're doing. We'll talk about that a little more here in a second. With a chess or a sport or even music, you can play it in front of someone else, have them examine how you're doing. There's also this idea of mental representations, which we'll go into more detail on, but essentially it's you're leveling up an experience and skill as you practice. So as you go through something, you're learning something new and you're reinforcing that learning as you go. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then focusing on particular aspect of your skills and working to improve them specifically. So again, going back to like a music or guitar example, not just playing one song, cool, I played that song, I'll do it again, but maybe taking like a 60-second slice of that song and working on just that part of it. Or in athletics, maybe working on just the way you throw a pitch, like working on just your curveball over and over until you get the hang of it. So those are the sort of overview of what deliberate practice is. Now this notion of mental representations is kind of, was maybe most interesting aspect to me. So there were some studies done in the 40s by a Dutch researcher, a study of chess players. And what they would do is they would show chess players as well as, they'd show highly skilled chess players as well as novice or people that didn't play chess. Chess boards with 20 to 25 pieces set up in the way that a chessboard looks. And they would just show them a glimpse of this board. And then they would take away the board and ask people to recall what they had just seen. The results are what you expect. Chess masters could recall the position of every piece, while non-players could place only 4 to 5 pieces. So the pros could look at a chessboard for just a couple seconds, go, cool, I know almost every piece on there. Novice players, like Sam probably, would only pick up 4 or 5. That makes sense, right? That's what they do. So are these chess players talented? Do they just have some special ability? Well, then they took, in the study, they took the chessboards and they randomized them. I have this on the slide here. There we go, 4 to 5. So then they randomized the pieces and they put them in a way that wouldn't come up in a game. And can anybody guess how many the pros got once they did that? Pretty much 6 to 7 pieces. So it wasn't even that they had great memory skills. They didn't have photographic memory. What they had was a mental representation of what the board could be. After years and years of experience, they could examine a chessboard after only a few seconds and recognize it. They were building upon knowledge that they had already encountered, been through, studied, and practiced. Another study, which is all over that book Peak, so really worth at least a look or listen to that podcast. In the 1980s, they brought, Anders Ericsson and his fellow researchers brought in people to memorize random strings of numbers. So they were interested in people's ability to memorize and whether they can improve memory through deliberate practice. So they'd bring in a subject and they would give them a string of random numbers, 7, 4, 0, 1, and then they would stop and people would repeat the numbers back to them. On average, people could get about 6 or 7 digits correct. Phone numbers, how long are they? 7 digits, interesting. After 4 long sessions, one subject, Steve, he could remember about 7 numbers. He had average IQ. He was a psychology major. I think he was a runner. You know, standard person. Didn't have any specialized skills. So yeah, after his first few days, he could get up to 7 or 8. After 200 training sessions, he could remember 82 digits just through practicing. He would build, he was a runner, so he would build representations of the numbers in his head, like, oh, 948, that was my time running the 2 miles, stuff like that. Pretty interesting. Benjamin Franklin, supposedly him in the middle, working on the printing press back in the day. I know, it's such a great photo. And also not the $100 bill and whatever else that you normally see. He had an exchange of letters with John Collins. I think it was his cousin. Of course, John Collins sounds like an idiot because he was arguing whether women should be educated. So this is back in 1700s. Franklin, thankfully, was on the good side, told him he was an idiot. This back and forth exchange of letters, Franklin took to his father, and his father said, well, you did pretty good. You're clearly on the right side of the argument, but you need to work on your elegance of expression in method and in perspicuity, of which he convinced me by several instances, Franklin said. So what did Franklin do after getting this feedback on, well, your writing's good, but it's maybe not great? He found some materials from a periodical, I believe, called The Spectator that had a series of articles in it. Franklin would read The Spectator. He would take notes on the essays and articles that were in there. Then he would put the book away. He would take the article, or the notes he had written, and he would try and rewrite the article. And then he would compare it to the original one and see how he did. He also wanted to improve his vocabulary. So he would rewrite the essays in poems and in verse. Again, put the article away. He would then take his poems, rewrite it, and see how closely it compared to the original essay. And this is my favorite one. He would take notes on each sentence in the essay, but he would do it on a separate piece of paper. Then he would put them aside for weeks and scramble them all, or he'd scramble them all up and he'd put them away for weeks, and then weeks later he'd come back and try and put together that same essay through his disorganized notes in an effort to teach himself organization. The quote from this book is, let me get back to my notes here. Significantly, he did not try to become a better essay writer by just sitting down and writing essays. That would have been one form of practice, right? I need to learn better, I'll just write more. Instead, like a top-ranked athlete or musician, he worked over and over on the specific aspects that needed improvement. So that comes from this book, Talent is Overrated. It was written, I think, in 2008. It's kind of a summary to some of these other books like Peak and Grit. And that's where a lot of this content comes from. So deliberate practice is more than just doing something over and over. It's doing something in a specific way that you want to measure, that you can use to improve your performance, that you can repeat a lot, that gives you feedback that's continuously available. It's highly demanding, right? It stresses you out. Some people can only do it for an hour or two at a time, and it's not much fun. All right, so why are we interested in deliberate practice? Or maybe why am I just interested in it? This book, Grit, also an excellent book. It talks about passion and perseverance and how to use these things to get you over hurdles. So you want to be a better developer. You don't want to sign your name on the Spectre and Meltdown attacks. Maybe you don't want to be responsible for the Hawaii missile alert. Well, you can go write code and you can go do fun stuff. But if you really want to get better, you might need to focus on the way that you perform and especially how you practice before that performance. In Grit, Angela Duckworth talks about people that want to have a big goal. Like, I want to be where's Mark? I want to be an author, right? And that's great, but you need to have smaller goals that you can break down and get yourself there. So that's an important part of this process of giving yourself something you can do over and over, that you can get feedback on, that you can measure and slowly improve over time. Yeah, that's deliberate practice. All right. I just gave you a lot of info. I cooked my own brain a little bit during that. So let's take a 10-second break. And does anybody have any questions before we go a little further? I do. I will definitely post it after slides.com/virtualandy/practice. No, you can't really see it back there, but it's up there in live. Yeah, I know. We'll make sure you have it. I need to add some stuff to the end of it too, so updates coming. All right, so kind of went through the psychology of deliberate practice. Here's what I think could be useful as we go forth. So for individuals, many of us might be just working alone. Maybe we're working remote. Maybe we're doing freelance gigs. You want to get better. You want to improve. Code kata is traditionally one way to do that. Give yourself a little problem set. Work on it. What's really nice is you can do it over and over and over. Some people like to do the same kata. Some people look for new ones. Code Wars is, I haven't actually used that myself, but I believe a way to also like compare yourself with others, and nice feedback mechanism kind of built into that. So katas are great. And the other thing I like about a kata is that you can try it like two different ways. Write it in a functional style, write it in an imperative style, write it in a different language, write it, in some weird language that you've never used before. Along those lines, exorcism.io and sort of the idea of mentoring is part of that. So not only are you completing an exercise or doing something, you're also getting a mentor to help you out. kind of touches on that coaching aspect, right? Like you have someone who maybe already knows how to solve that problem, giving you a little bit of guidance and feedback to give you correction. And then other ways, code review and PRs. There's plenty of open source projects out there that you can go take a look at, much like chess. People that want to get better at chess might study chess masters and old games and immerse themselves in that realm. You could study other PRs. One thought I had was, what if you took a pull request, ignored the comments, like give it your own review, and then compare those to the comments that somebody else wrote, much like Benjamin Franklin did. Along those lines, CodePen, Code Sandbox, easy ways to spin up a little project, write some code, get started, and get feedback on it. 100 days of code, Sam kind of touched on the Oktoberfest sort of thing, like commit yourself to something that's going to be demanding mentally. To do that every day is not probably going to be fun for part of it, but you might learn a lot through that process. All right. So that hopefully gives you a couple examples of what you can do as an individual. Now you're probably on a team as well, maybe even if it's just one other person or you're in a bigger office. So what can we do there? Again, mentoring and pairing gives you sort of the coaching aspect. You can pair with someone and say, look, I want to get better at SQL. Can you please help me, learn SQL, practice it maybe once a week or, a couple times a month. Again, highly demanding mentally. I don't know if anybody here pairs all the time, but if you've ever done that for like a couple series of days, it taxes you for sure. And again, some people hate pairing. Might not be much fun. Might not be much fun to get coached on and get that immediate feedback over and over. But we've seen some examples of how powerful that can be. You can talk to your team about reducing tech debt or maybe performance improvements. The thing I like about that idea, it gives you a chance to have feedback. Everybody has fancy regression tests and performance analysis, right? Maybe. But if you did have those kind of things, you'd have instant feedback built in, like deploy some new code, get feedback on it, and go. All right. Other ideas, maybe you can do the 20% time thing, like devote yourself to practicing 1 day a week or some series of time. Spikes and tracer bullets, you can use those to kind of suss out new ideas. Maybe you always do a spike in a new language that you want to learn or with a new technology. I really like the idea of Redis as distributed memory, right? Like you can use Redis as a data store, but you can also kind of use it as just extra RAM, and it might be fun to try experiments with something like that where you're kind of taking on a new approach or a new technology and using it in a way that's maybe outside your skill set and going to stretch you a little bit. The other nice thing here too is I think you could identify like specific areas, like I want to help make the caching layer faster, or I want to understand web workers better, and then you can use a spike to kind of suss that out. All right. So humor me for a minute on a slight detour. Spending time working on practice is not the performance that we're going to get paid to do, right? So we're probably going to run into roadblocks here. People are going to ask, why are you spending time on that? And certainly don't want you to give up your own personal time. You all have lives, you all have families, you have kids. I'm not suggesting that you spend 10 hours a week beyond your normal work. I think we can start to work this into software engineering and make it part of our profession that we practice, and especially in a deliberate manner. The carrot, I think, behind that stick, I like this idea of a slow hunch. Comes from Steven Johnson. If anybody watched the PBS series, How We Got to Now, he also wrote a book, Where Good Ideas Come From, that look at the history of innovations and new ideas and how they kind of came to light. And what he talks about is that very rarely is there any sort of eureka moment with a good idea. And so by working on something over time, maybe spending time practicing on something that doesn't have quite the immediate goal, when you do get there, it could be really good for your company, right? The classic example is Apple really built an iPad before they built the iPhone, right? And then somewhere along the line, they noticed everybody had phones. They said, hey, can we take that thing that we've been working on and never seen the light of day and turn that into something greater? Yeah, I think that other areas, other fields and other professions don't have the advantage that we do of open source and sort of the ability to work on something without it, seeming like some weird kind of practice that maybe a tennis player couldn't get away with. We can kind of noodle on ideas and think about them, use our teammates and the open source community to crunch on that for a long time, and we might come up with something really good, really beneficial, both for our company or maybe even society. All right, so in terms of organizations, how can we do deliberate practice there? One idea obviously is training, right? Like educate yourself, get your company to sponsor education for you with the goal of specifically improving some aspect or some skill. Conferences are nice for that, right? You can go, I want to go to this Go conference because I really want to work on Go and get better, and you can identify certain courses to get you there. Maybe sabbaticals are a better idea, like give yourself time to work on something. Ask your organization for time to practice and improve over a period of time where you're not just kind of jamming it into your day-to-day activities. Take advantage of community, just talked about that a little bit. Use the community to help you get feedback, right? And also maybe work on certain aspects of skills. And I love the idea of R&D. So hackathons, my company Cloudability just completed a hack week. So lots of energy can go into working together and trying to improve one specific thing, even if it's only over a couple days. Maybe if you can do that once a quarter, twice a year, you can start to enhance those skills. Gives you the opportunity to get feedback. Obviously, you're working with others, and potentially can be repeated a lot. Kaggle.com, if anybody's data science heavy in here, gives problems and data sets that you can work on over time. So a good way to sort of measure yourself against others and even your org as a whole. All right, enough with the psychology, Andy. Get on to the demo. Thankfully, Kevin did most of this for me earlier. What I was going to show is Gatsby. What I was looking for as I examined this idea of deliberate practice is ways that I can get immediate feedback, that I can have some fun, because if it's not going to be fun, it's going to be even harder for me to do, and gives me a chance to sort of stretch specific skills. So in the case of React, we're at the React meetup. If I want to improve my React skills, Gatsby is a nice way to do that. What I like about Gatsby, let's see if I can pull this off here. I'm going to have to switch my display. Give me 1 second. All right, let's see. Cool. Interesting. My mouse is locked to half of my screen. All right, well, I'm not sure what we'll do with that. I can't get past that part of it. What I like about Gatsby is they give you starter projects, so you have something to start with. One problem I have when practicing is I end up noodling on something unimportant, changing my IDE scheme or trying some weird plugin, something like that. And what I really want to do is just get started. So let me see if we can get over here. Boy, this is, I'm not sure. Let's try this. Hey, there we go. Yeah. All right, let me see if I can. Oh, thank you. See if I can get back up here. So I'm not very good with Gatsby at all. I'd like to get better, and I set up a little blog to help myself do that. I lied to myself and said I would work on it every night. That hasn't been the case. Blame my little kids at home, maybe. But one of the things that I wanted to mess around with is, here's my blog. Let me make it a little bigger. Is I like on Medium when you look at something and it says your estimated reading time. So I just went into Gatsby and hard-coded like 42, because of course. So let me see if I can find where that is. And I'll blow this up for sure. All right, let me see here. Where did that go? Let me get rid of this. All right, so estimated reading time, 42 hours. I just kind of threw that in there when Gatsby builds and deploys to Netlify. That's what shows up. So what I was working on earlier today was instead, turns out there's an NPM package that will do a quick analysis of how much text you have. It's just the library, pulled it into Gatsby, let me focus on one little thing that I wanted to try and figure out. What I'd like to do is turn that into a Gatsby plugin. I think maybe Gatsby already does something like that, but it'd be fun to release an open source plugin that just does that people can use. So this was like the hacky way to do it. And if I come in here, and I think we had a Gatsby talk here a couple months back, right? All right, so if I run Gatsby develop, it should build my React stuff. And if we look at it locally instead of online, now we have a better time. 1 minute read, 1 minute read, 1 minute. You can tell I wasn't writing much. 6 minutes, there we go, I shared some notes. Cool. And I was going to show more about Netlify, but Kevin did that for me. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I know, that was awesome. So I'll merge that and it will go to prod, so it's hooked up to Bitbucket and all that kind of fun stuff. All right. So I think Gatsby's a really nice way to sort of get you in the React ecosystem. There's a lot of examples. It's easy to get started. It's easy to mess around with stuff. And it's really fast. It deploys to something like Netlify really quick. Gives you that instant feedback. I just showed you all my, link to my blog, like Kevin showed us earlier. Super easy. Throw something out there. Ask somebody for help. Hey, what do you think's wrong with this? How can I improve this? Give yourself that feedback and work on maybe just a certain aspect of it. Yeah, tons of examples out there to get started with. This one I thought was interesting because they already have that same thing. So I haven't gone to look at what they do, but I want to look at that later and compare it to what I was trying to do. Cool. The one that Kevin didn't show, thankfully, is Apex Up. So if you recognize TJ, big Node contributor, developed Express, Super Agent. What else did he do? A whole ton of stuff. Super awesome guy. Also a really good photographer. That's his photo in the background. I'm not going to mess with trying to share these slides in the other way so I don't lose my mouse again. So apologies, but I'll at least make it bigger here. Up is similar to Now. It takes your code and turns it into a Lambda and deploys it to AWS and kind of takes care of all the messy stuff under the covers. So for you, it just looks like an app. And before Lambda supported Go and some of the other languages, you could do it through Up. He has a pro version, costs I think $10 a month or $20 a month. That coupon code there gets you half off. He was very nice to extend that to me earlier this year. If I go look at one of those projects real quick. All right, let's see here. So this is an Up project, or going to be, if I can get us there. Somebody asked about configuring Now earlier. This is the Up version. So they do have a little bit of configuration. It uses your existing AWS credentials. I had this terrible idea to do a URL lengthener instead of a URL shortener. So that's what's running there. If I go to the terminal, that's like stretching your skills in the wrong direction, but that's fine. Let's go here. All you have to do is run Up. If I look at the app.js file here, you can see it's just a simple Express app, nothing special. There's a little bit of magic going on in Up, but we don't care about that. What we're more interested in is our own skills and let TJ take care of the mess for us. So you type Up, it'll deploy it out there. And what's cool is you can say something like this, and it will go out there and hit what we just deployed. So I said, hello, React Denver meetup. If I come in here and change that, now with practice, we can run Up again. It will redeploy pretty quickly. Yeah, a fun way to get stuff out there. Again, maybe this gives you a chance to stretch your skills in a little bit more ways. You could hook this up to a React app. You could mess around with Lambda a little bit. but you don't have to worry about spending time on the part you don't care about. Hopefully you can focus on the feedback and the skill building. And it's kind of fun, so that one's not too bad. Show it in action here. We're going to post a URL to it. No, it's a little bit hard to see, so we're going to post TJ's Twitter feed. It's just an in-memory database, so it takes a second, but there's our token that we just lengthened that URL, but now we can request this token here. And if I get rid of that, there we go. So there's my URL lengthener. Again, maybe not the best skill building, but kind of fun to experiment with Lambda and use up to just get something up quickly and deployed quickly. And then the next one I was going to show is now, but again, Kevin thankfully did that for me. What I will show is that I also put a silly little project out there for this one. I call it the startup name generator for villains. So we're at the React meetup. We're in Denver, and you click the button, and it just kind of jams villain names from comic books along with whatever you did to create a goofy name generator. But again, the idea with this is just to create React app, and I just wanted to use now to get something out quickly, and then I can mess around with material UI and some of the other things that maybe I want to build my skills on quickly. All right. Cool. One last thing I'll touch on the psychology aspect. If anyone's familiar with this idea of Myelin, let me see, I think I can get rid of my notes for this. All right, so really good article from Buffer, if anyone's familiar with that app and that company. They're, I think, really great. They open source a lot of their material. They have a good blog post on why practice actually makes perfect. There's a lot of studies that are being done that show that the neurons that are firing in your brain are kind of enhanced when this sort of sheath here, the myelin, grows. And so this is some of what you see in, say, the chess masters as they're learning about chess and immersing themselves in the positions, is you're actually altering the physicality of your brain. And why I think that's important too is that, you know, as an industry, we're obviously not good with equality. We're not good with discrimination in some aspects. We're not good with bugs. There's a lot of improvements that we can make, but it's going to take practice to get us there, and not just goofing around practice, not just playing the guitar for an hour, like really working on it. And so if we're altering our brain to support those new knowledge and new approaches, we can do that with also how we treat people. So there's studies going on that you know, show this to be true, and I hope that over time, as we start being more accepting, more open, we can bring in better ideas, maybe help us get away from some of those bugs. That's kind of fun to think about, that you're actually changing the way your brain works through practice. Thank you very much. This is my first time giving this talk, so I'm practicing on you all. I'd love to hear any feedback, what you thought worked great, what was too boring, what I should take out or remove. I'm Virtual Andy on all the things, Twitter and all that. I work at Cloudability. Love to talk to you about what that's like and cloud cost management. We talked a little bit about Heroku and some of those things. Happy to go into that. So yeah, thank you very much. Any questions beyond that? Yeah.
To how the review actually came out. I think I definitely grew professionally doing a lot of, you know, PR reviews on a little small team. I think I would add to that for the consistency that you maybe stick to a couple authors so that you can kind of pick up a particular style. Because, you know, how it goes in these things is there are a million different styles, right? There's not like a right way to do it.
Right.
But if you can maybe find somebody out in the community that you really like groove on their style, you know, then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it gets to the point too of like focusing on a single skill or a small goal and not just going, I want to be a great PR reviewer. Well, that's good, but you're going to need a lot of smaller steps to get there. The example in Grit was like, college kids, I want to play in the NBA. Well, that's awesome, but how are you going to play on the practice squad? How are you going to get a scholarship? How are you going to, make it as a professional? Like, give yourself the small goals. I totally think those small goals are key to then reaching the longer goals. Sure. He said the book list was a good part of the thing. Yeah, I didn't have time to finish all these slides like I wanted to. One of the things I want to do is add all the references at the end. So yeah, I definitely want to keep that in there. Thank you. Cool. All right. Well, I just filled your brains up, hopefully. So let's get out of here and maybe have a beverage. Thank you.
Yeah, please, one last round of applause for Andy.